What's up everybody, welcome back to the channel and welcome to another Pokemon Scarlet and Violet VGC video. Today is going to be a video for those of you who are more interested in competing in real life tournaments, for regionals, locals, etc. This is a pretty huge change, but also a change that isn't as drastic as you might think. It's hard. I'm going to explain how it isn't actually as bad as a lot of people are thinking it is. But before we get into that, if you guys enjoy this gameplay in time, do me a favor, leave a like in the video, subscribe to the channel, and turn on notifications because I bring you daily competitive Pokemon content. And answer my question in the comment section down below. What do you think about this change? Anyways, let's get into it. So what's the change? You guys are all on the edge of your seat. It's been 45 seconds and you still don't know. The change is pretty simple. In tournaments now, where previously everything on your team, except for, how do I say it? This is effectively what your opponent would see at the start of a match. You're like 6 Pokemon, right? And you would see if they held an item, because that's what the battle UI has. Now, at the start of each VGC tournament match, you're going to be required to exchange team lists with your opponent. So your opponent, rather than having all of that info, will now have all of the info from every info except for the actual stats. So everything from here to the left. So your opponent will know your item, your ability, your 4 moves, and your Terra type. Now, some people are thinking that this is the worst change ever. Some people are thinking that this is going to be a negative for new players and that it only benefits older players or more experienced players. But as someone who hasn't been that into open team list formats, by the way, this is referred to as open team list or open team sheet. As someone who's been a fan of closed team sheet, I'm gonna say it, this is probably the right time to do it. Let me explain why. So basically in modern VGC, there are a lot more factors than there were in old VGC. There are more items, more abilities. Each Pokemon can run a multitude of sets, and as someone who's always said that, you know, probing for information, trying to figure out speed tiers, trying to figure out items, abilities is a big skill thing in the game. As someone who enjoys that part of the game, I think that this is the year that they probably should have made this change. So what I want to go over are the changes that this has to how the game is played, the pros and cons, and just have a general discussion. You know, don't get mad at me that I disagree with people who think that this is a bad change. I think this is actually probably a good change that actually helps newer players more than you'd think. But there are some downsides, and I am going to address those downsides. But in the end, I'm gonna, spoiler, say that I think that the positives like just super outweigh the negatives. So let's start off with the negatives. I'm going to talk about the negatives of this change so we can get those out of the way. For one, the information game is gone. This is something that I've always enjoyed as part of the game. I really like the best of 3 format because while in best of 1, your opponent could pull up with like a random Dondozo team. Ignore the fact that there's a Fluttermane. This is an old team that we used before it was legal. Actually, you know, let's go to a legal team. Here we go. Where before your opponent would, like, you know, be facing this Dondozo team, and they have no idea like what Terra type you are, and they find out like in the course of the match, oh, I'm Terra Steel, and you Terra Steel on the turn that they go for Clear Smog, blocking the Clear Smog. Now they know for game 2 not to try that, and then, you know, you take that information and move on with it and try to use it to your best advantage to win the set. That is a big part of the game that I very much enjoyed. I enjoyed figuring out if my opponent had Hypnosis on their Gothitelle because they missed it 5 times. I enjoyed finding out if they were leftovers or Throat Spray Sylveon. I enjoy all of that. But all things considered, all this really does is put both opponents on an equal playing field. And they always were on an equal playing field in the sense that no one knew what the other opponent had. But in another way, it puts them on an equal playing field, which I'll touch on towards the end of this video. But it makes it so like every game is like a game 3 situation. You have the most information possible, barring the actual stats. You still have to probe for speed tiers, don't get me wrong. And like, you know, defense and like figure out like how bulky something is. You still have to do that. But now every game is like game 3. You know the items, you can make the optimal play. In a way, the removal of that sort of surprise factor makes it a little bit more of a skill-based game, Granted, I will say that information probing is a skill, and playing safe is a skill, that sort of thing. If we could remove crits, that'd be very baller, but unfortunately, no. And the other big negative that I've seen, and I also have to talk about choice items in a second, but the other big negative that I've seen is ladder practice is a lot less applicable. When your opponent has, here's the team sheet, by the way. When your opponent has all of this information, except for the stats, you play the game a little bit more differently. When you're playing on the showdown ladder, if you're playing against like a random team, let me open up a random battle for an example, right? When you're like playing against someone on showdown and you have no idea what their items are, what their abilities are, how would I play this? That's a far-fetched. I have to use information that I have from previous games. What would a far-fetched run? Usually they're leak for the high crit chance, but for all I know, my opponent's choice band for the consistent damage. How fast are they? You know, this and that. What moves did they run? In my experience, like, you know, the right play here would be, okay, well, if they're not running defog, we'll go for sticky whip. That's like a singles thing. I had no idea they had swords dance, now I'm in trouble. But now, if we were to play a best of 3, that information would be mine and I could move on with it. That's gone. And that sort of makes it so that way, like, ladder practice isn't the same thing as like tournament practice. Now, the best way to practice is best of 3s, where you and your opponent exchange team information. That is a pretty big thing. Another negative would be that now it's very hard to hide teams. Before, you could pull up to a tournament and, you know, do well in the tournament with the team and then leave the tournament, and all of a sudden, you know, people know more about your team, but they don't know the specifics. It's still technically a private team. Only the judge knows the team because they have the team sheet, that sort of thing. And I would say the final negative that we're going to talk about before we get into the positives is choice items. A lot of things lose value when you know what they are. So choice band Pokemon, like let's go with, or choice specs, let's go with like Golden Go. A lot of Golden Go will run choice specs for the, why am I like so bad at using the UI today? We'll run like choice specs because, you know, it's a valuable item for like getting a lot of damage off. But if you see on the team sheet that your opponent has a choice specs Golden Go, you can try to force them to lock themselves into a move and like just play around that. Like that information is pretty important. Choice Scarf is another big one. If they're running like a Choice Scarf Pokemon, now if you lead off versus that Golden Go with a Pokemon that you're fairly certain outspeeds, now that you see the Scarf, it's like, oh, well, now I know it, I don't outspeed. That's what I mean when it's like a game 3 situation every single game. You have the maximum amount of information, you're going to play as optimal as you can given that stuff. So yeah, I think that like items like Choice Scarf, like Focus Sash Pokemon, I keep typing it in like it's an item, oh my god. Like Focus Sash Pokemon, lose a little bit of value off of those things, because now if your opponent leads off with like a Focus Sash Gallade, you know, oh, I should probably, you know, fake out and, I don't know, Spirit Break that Gallade to KO it because the Focus Sash will allow it to live. These items significantly drop in value now that they're shown. That's not to say that they're not going to be used. I still think that like frail Pokemon, like, I don't know, what's a super frail guy? Like Breloom, Focus Sash is still 100% the play, because it's almost like a source of pressure. Most people expect Focus Sash on the Breloom anyway, so they would like double into it. Like this is the sort of Pokemon that remains that value. But yeah, those are gone. With that out of the way, with all these cons out of the way, let's talk about the pros. And these are things that I think a lot of people aren't covering that they really should be covering. For one, Terras are visible. The surprise factor of Terra, as fun as it might be, does come with so many layers that it becomes a little bit difficult to play around without, like let's say that your opponent brings like their Hydreigon game 3. Well, the Hydreigon can be a variety of Terras and run it viably. Dark, Dragon, some big ones are Steel, Poison, and Fighting, Fire. Those are like Terras that Hydreigon likes to run. That information could win them the game if it was hidden, like off of just, oh, well, I didn't know they were Terra Fire Hydreigon, I lost to that. You know, they hid that information well, that's great. But I think Pokemon right now, for the sake of making the game a little bit more competitive, wants this to be disclosed at the beginning of a match, which I'm fine with. You're not going to always Flare Blitz into an Amoonguss and then have it be like Terra Water, and then all of a sudden it like lives the hit. Like now you're a little bit more cautious about that. You know when it's coming. You know that it has the potential to do this. So now I guess the new skill would be, rather than probing for information about their Terra type, like, you know, Terra Fire to block like Will-O-Wisp on Annihilate, now the goal would be getting them to pop their Terra on a particular Pokemon, and then Now that that's out of the way, you're safe to use your moves. Like, you have to like pressure them to do stuff like that. Like, that's a big thing. I think the biggest person who like doesn't benefit from this is gonna be Dondozo, because Dondozo runs a ton of Terra types: water, steel, dragon, grass. Like, these are all like, fighting for like body press sets. Like, these are all viable Dondozo sets. As a matter of fact, like, now you can see when Dondozo's running like rest, sleep talk sets, or when it's running like well, it's always gonna have order up, but like order up plus like Ice Fang to like hit Amoonguss. Like, that's a thing that you now see at the beginning of the match. I consider that a little bit of a positive. There are so many layers to the game right now that I could see maybe it not being the most balanced without like this information being disclosed. Another thing that is something that a lot of people who don't play competitive don't know about is when you're playing in a tournament, and this is the biggest thing. This is like my main crux as to why this is actually a change that's positive for the competitive scene. This is the biggest thing that I mentioned at the start of the video. Top players have a lot of connections. Let's use like, we'll use Wolfie as an example. Wolfie is like one of the most well-known players, one of the most successful players, has a lot of friends in the community. All top players do what I'm about to describe because it's not against the rules, it's completely optimal. What happens is you have a lot of friends and you top cut a tournament. You know that you're gonna be facing, I don't know, like this person, and like for round 1 of top cut, and you ask your friend like, hey, did you face Paul? And he's like, yeah, Paul's got Prankster Murkrow, it's got Foul Play, Tailwind, but you need to be careful because it also has Icy Wind, which isn't all that common, so you need to be careful of that. Now you have that information going into the match. As a matter of fact, you can piece together your opponent's teams in Top Cut just via the information of people who fought them. The more connections you have in the game, the more you're going to be able to practice for Top Cut, because like you'll go back to like the hotel room, right? And then like, let's say I'm hanging out with like Brady and I like top cut the match, but Brady played against Paul here. And I say, Brady, what do you know about Paul's team? He goes, I know so much about it. And then Michael's like, oh yeah, I know a lot about his team too. We can reconstruct his entire team, and then we'll just play matches tonight on Showdown and practice against that team over and over and over again. Now the issue is, let's say Paul showed up to this tournament and this is his first top cut ever. He hasn't been to a lot of tournaments, and he is going into this completely blind. So where the person who has friends in the community, who has like all these like connections, has practiced against Paul's team, you know, 6 or 7 times the night before, Paul's gonna go up against this person with almost no information. That is a big equalizer. That's what I mean when I say like, this is a change that benefits newer players. There's no longer that information advantage when people haven't even faced their opponents yet, but their friends have faced their opponents. Now all of that's like completely even. Another thing that is like very niche that a lot of people don't know about is it's a disadvantage to be streamed. During VGC events, you know, the people who top cut the events will usually have at least 1 or 2 of their matches streamed. Like, people who do well will be on the Pokemon's Twitch channel and they'll like commentate the matches. Well, guess what? Now there's a lot of information that is just out there about your team. It's optimal to avoid the stream, because your opponent might have watched your stream match the night before they have to play you, and they're like, oh yeah, I can see the Choice Scarf on this guy, I can see the Life Orb on him, I noticed that this thing's calced to live +2 Earthquake from Garchomp. All those sort of things, out the door, no longer necessary. The game is reducing the need for connections and the cheese of the game, I guess. A lot of people like the cheese, like they like being able to say like, oh, actually, I'm not Population Bomb, I don't know, I'm gonna make something up. I'm not Population Bomb Mousehold. I'm actually Choice Banded Hyper Beam. I'm making something up, right? Like, that's not a set. But like, you know, that sort of thing is no longer a big deal. You know about it. Everyone is playing a game of skill at that point, barring crits, misses, the usual. Pokemon's never gonna be a complete game of skill, but that's just how it is. That's a huge thing. Like, I think that this is the biggest change that benefits newer players and older players. You know, it's just, this is a positive thing. I don't know. Like, it's hard for me to like explain it any better. And I'm trying to put this in the most positive light possible, because I know that there are going to be a lot of people in the comment section that don't quite understand how much this matters to newer players. when it comes to like putting them on equal footing with like the older players with a lot of friends and connections in the community. But it goes a long way, and it's hard to describe just how much it matters. And for those of you who are going to comment, you know, this is going to ruin VGC, it's going to make team diversity worse, it's going to make it like impossible to use your favorites because now there's an optimal team, I got some news for you. This isn't new. The grassroots community, this tournament I've been showing you as an example, this was the largest VGC tournament we've had in Scarlet and Violet so far. You know, here's like the top 200 players. Guess what? Open team sheet. Exact same information. You know, this is stuff that like you knew everything about your opponent's team except for stats going in. And it made it like a more balanced thing. As a matter of fact, this isn't even the first time that we've had open team sheets for official Pokemon events. I participated in Players Cup 2, 3, and 4, I believe. It might have been, was it 4? I think it was 4. But I participated in those. All of the Players Cups, because they were online and people had the potential to change their team between matches because there wasn't really a way to hack check, they were open team sheet. You were able to click on your opponent's team, say, oh, they have, you know, these abilities, these moves. And while it did change the way that you played the game because there was no longer the need to probe for information, it didn't change what Pokemon got used. You still saw these amazing teams. I was still able to do pretty well with an Appleton team. I was still able to do pretty well with an Alolan Marowak, like Trick Room, Tapu Koko sort of thing in Players Cup 2. A lot of people think it's gonna like change the game, but fundamentally, we're still playing Pokemon. This tournament has insane team diversity. Look at this, like no team looks the same. Like, yeah, there are like certain archetypes. You see like Dondozo, Tatsugiri teams, but like here, you know, Gyarados. Actually, you know, let's look at the top teams. Why not that? The team that won, Goldango. Obviously, you guys have seen this on ladder because it's a rental now. Goldango, Murkrow, Dragonite, Hydreigon, Ceruledge, and Gengar. And then the next place team is, you know, Terragrass, Armarouge, Sylveon, Dondozo stuff. And then the next team is like more Murkrow Hyper Offense. And then we have one more Dondozo. And then from then on, what do we have? We have Grimmsnarl, Annihilate, Skeledirge, and Mudsdale. A little bit more Murkrow Hyper Offense. We have this bulkier Garchomp, Rotom, Wash, Corviknight team. Murkrow Hyper Offense. That's like every other team right now, by the way. Murkrow Hyper Offense is like just common right now. It's not that it's like over centralizing. It's just a thing. We have Grimmsnarl plus Skeledirge, Purifying Salt, Garganacl. We have an Abomasnow team, another Murkrow team. Here we have a Mousehold Hydreigon team. You get my point, right? Like, this isn't like a lack of team diversity. There's a lot of different teams going around, and while you will see like a couple staple cores, that's normal. This is the game we've always played. I don't know. I just want to like make it clear that this is like my opinion as to like how this will affect gameplay. I think it's a good thing. You can leave your comments down below. Tell me why you think it's a bad thing. You know, I would like you guys to tell me your opinions on this because I want to hear some feedback. Obviously, if you're not competing in tournaments, you can have an opinion on it, but getting upset about it isn't gonna like be that big because if you're just like a ladder player, there's not really a reason to get upset about it because you're not competing. Like it doesn't affect you. Everyone who's playing, like everyone who's like a ladder warrior, everyone on Showdown, everyone on the official ladder, nothing changes for you. This is just the competitive circuit beginning in January. So yeah, let me know in the comment section down below what you guys think. Leave a like if you enjoyed, subscribe, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Bye.